Hey guys, welcome back to How to Roll Dice. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be doing a quick little review and walkthrough of this game here, Processing, a game of serving humanity. Processing is by Fight in a Box Games. They also make Squirrel or Die and Hedgehog Hop, which I have reviewed previously, and they also have a new game coming out called End of the Line, which I have not yet been able to play, but I've heard very good things about. Fight in a Box games are often very quick to learn and a lot of fun to play. They often have goofy, silly kind of concepts to them, and having met their creator several times, Seppi, he is a great guy, and he is very, very enthusiastic about his games, and it really comes through in how they play. The premise of this game is that you and the other players are humans, or possibly cows, who have been abducted by aliens. These aliens, who refer to themselves as the Confederated Alien Overlords, CAO, which is cow, are interested in having you attempt to meet their various agendas, and they want you to do that by voting on the fate of various hipsters and cows, cow being the animal, that they have abducted. Those fates could be probed for science, processed into meat, or freed, set free. You and the other players are going to be voting on individual agendas that you keep secret to yourselves, matching those of various different alien overlords. And so you're likely going to be voting against your other players for the outcome of any given group of hipsters or cows. So you can see right there, concept, a little bit silly, but also lots of fun. Looking at what you get with the game, you've got some voting tokens over here. These are cardboard tokens with the colors and symbols for the three voting options, the three fate options: probe, meat, and free. You've got two tracks here, one for tracking your mad cow points. That is sort of the negative track. You do not want to go up on that track. This is the VP track. This is the track you do want to go up on. You've got your three fate cards that I've pointed out before. That's for keeping track of which cards have tallied out and voted to sort of rule on those three specific fates. I'll get into that in a minute. You've got your agenda cards here. These are the different alien overlords that you're actually trying to appease. And you can see they've got some really fun art on them right there. These are the missionarians, for example. And you can see on the left-hand side there, it actually shows you what their preferred fate for the two different groups, hipsters and cows, are. So you can see they want hipsters to be set free, they want cows to be turned into meat, and they absolutely do not want hipsters to be probed. And that's that little brown sort of X at the bottom there. So stars are victory points, that's a good thing. The brown cow X, which is the mad cow symbol, is the do not do this thing. And those all obviously vary based off of which agenda and which alien overlord you're trying to appease. I should say that some of them are also numbered with a small 5 or 6 in the upper corner. That's just to vary the cards that are included in the agenda deck when you're playing with a different number of players. So you can play this game with 3 to 6 players, and the cards that you deal out for agendas varies based off of the number of players you have, which is pretty common. You've also got your lot cards here. These are the groups of cows and hipsters that are going to be coming into the alien factory for processing. They're going to be coming down a sort of virtual conveyor belt towards their inevitable fate. And these cards show a combination of hipsters and cows, as well as the number of possible votes before that card becomes tallied. So you can see here, this card is 2 hipsters and 1 cow, and it will take 4 votes for this card to become tallied. Once it's tallied, their fate is kind of sealed, and that card is placed above the fate that it was voted for. There's also a lovely bit of flavor text on each of these. This one says, "You can't fool us by agreeing with us." And they're all kind of fun things like that. I'm actually going to place that here on what would be the conveyor belt area, which is directly below the fate cards, because I might as well do that while I'm getting set up here. This card has a slightly different example of what you might see on a lot card. There are 2 hipsters and 4 voting spaces, but as you can see, one of those 4 voting spaces is already predetermined as a probe, which means this card is already leaning a bit in the probe direction. So if you wanted to do something else to these 2 hipsters, you're going to have to first counter that one probe, or at least deal with it, before you can lean in a different direction. And obviously, if you were trying to probe them, it's all the easier. So let's place that onto our conveyor belt here. And lastly, we have 2 cows. And these 2 cows have 4 voting spaces, though again, one of those has been predetermined as a set free. So if you're looking to set the cows free, that's good for you. And if you're looking to do something else to the cows, then you're going to have to fight against that. Again, the flavor text here, we're going to survive. And on the hipsters, there's something not quite right about this. So, fun game, kind of tongue-in-cheek. So, I've placed these here on the conveyor belt as that you would have placed them during setup at the beginning of the game. I'll get into that in a minute, but for now, just know that that's where the conveyor belt is going to be. So I'll place these lot cards over here, and I'll get into the overseer who sort of controls those when I get into the rules. Here, getting down to the sort of player accoutrement, are the player cards. You can see they are multicolored cards that say, "Hello, my name is," and they have fun names on them. I would guess that they are either some of the creators or early sponsors of the game. And then on the back sides of these cards, you're actually going to see a similar type card, except it says Rebel Agent, if I could talk. That is for a variant gameplay that you can do. It's documented in the rules, but I'm not going to go over it here because I haven't personally played it before, so I don't want to discuss it if I don't really have a feel for how it works. And then here you've got a couple different tokens that players are going to have. So you've got your standard sort of meeple token. That's this guy right here. You have got a nifty little cow meeple, which I don't think I've seen in any other game before. You have got these two sort of multipliers or track adjusters. This says +10. You've got two of those, and those can be used if you actually do so well, or I guess so poorly if you're on the mad cow track, that you actually do one full loop and you need to keep going. You add that to your meeple so that you know you've already done sort of one lap, and now you're on your second lap. And so each player, let's get into gameplay setup here. Each player is going to take a player card. They're going to take the corresponding tracker token, as well as the corresponding cow and corresponding meeple token. They're going to place their meeple. So let's say I'm playing as Orange, which is Steffi. Oddly enough, my wife's name. Let's say I'm going to play as Steffi, so I will take the orange pieces. I'm going to place my meeple at the head of the VP tracker. I'm going to place my cow at the head of the mad cow tracker. And I'm going to take my two tokens, which, as far as I've played, I've never needed, but, you know, if I do well enough, maybe they'll come up. And obviously other players are going to do the same and take their pieces. We're then going to shuffle the lot deck as well as the agenda deck. Let's say we're playing a 3-player game, right? You're going to pull the number 6 cards, which again have a 6 in the upper right corner, out of the agenda deck and place them back in the box. You're not going to be using them in a 3 or 4-player game. Those only come into play in a 5 or 6-player game. So you'd pull those out and you'd shuffle the agenda cards. I've already shuffled them, so we'll just leave those alone. You're also going to shuffle the lot cards. You are then going to deal out a number of agenda cards based off the number of players. In a 3-player game, I believe it's 4 agenda cards to each player, and those are to be kept secret for that player. They can view them. That's obviously, they want to know what agendas they're trying to accomplish. Again, that's what you're trying to vote in the direction of, whether it be probe hipsters and turn cows into meat, or free the cows and turn the hipsters into meat, or any combination. And again, there's usually a negative on those. I believe there's always a negative, so something that you're trying to avoid doing as well. So you're going to pass 4 agenda cards out to each player. They keep them secret. They can view them themselves. You're then going to determine who the overseer is. The overseer, according to the rules, is the player who has most recently aided aliens. Now, if you have a boring friend group and none of you have recently interacted with aliens at all, which is a real shame, you're going to go ahead and make the player who has most recently won a game the overseer, and they're going to take the lot cards. So assume that these 3 cards weren't here. This area would be blank. They're going to be in charge of the lot cards, at least for round 1. Then finally, each player is going to get 3 of each voting token. So 3 green for probing, 3 blue for freeing, and 3 red for meat. Those are a finite resource. Those do repopulate in between rounds. This is a 3-round game. However, they do not repopulate to full. You start with 3 of each. Going into round 2, you're only going to recoup 2 of each. And going into round 3, you're only going to recoup 1 of each. So if you happen to have agendas that all lean heavily in one direction, and you're constantly using that type of vote, you're eventually going to run out of that vote, and you'll no longer be able to cast votes for that fate. You'll have to sort of figure out other tricky ways to make it happen, or rely on other players to fall backwards into your plan, I suppose. So now that all players have their player card, their proper tokens and trackers, and their voting chips, and have been dealt agenda cards, the overseer, who has the lot cards, is going to take the top 3 cards, after shuffling of course, and flip them face up below the fate cards like I've done here. This is the conveyor belt, leading the hipsters and cows to their inevitable fate. The cards nearest the fate cards are referred to the front of the belt, and the cards farthest are referred to as the back of the belt. So if you read a rule that says place a card at the back of the conveyor belt, that's farthest from the fate cards, and front is closest. Though I don't think you ever place front. You do interact with the front cards somewhat, though. So, according to the rules, you're now ready to start the voting phase. The overseer, at the beginning of their turn, and they go first, before making their vote, always adds one lot card to the conveyor belt at the back of the line. So they're going to flip one card over here, and they're going to place it right there. I'm going to scoot these a bit so you guys can see them a little better, at the back of the conveyor line. Now, it doesn't matter that it's at the back, because when you vote, you can vote on any card that's on the conveyor belt. It just means that it's sort of a first in, first out system, and I'll get to that in a second. So once they've placed that card, which they do at the beginning of every one of their turns, the overseer that is, they can place a vote. So let's say that I wanted to turn, let's say I like this card right here because I'm actually trying to probe hipsters, and this gives me the opportunity to probe 2 hipsters. I'm going to take one of my probe votes and I place it on any of the open vote spaces, and that sort of moves that card towards the direction of those hipsters being probed. That card is not full, so we're not actually going to tally it yet. There are still 2 open vote spaces, but I've sort of ushered it in that direction. Now, if I were to place it on this card down here, which has 3 vote spaces, though one of them is predetermined with a probe symbol, I've now guaranteed that when that card is tallied, it will be tallied as a probe for that one hipster. However, it will not be tallied until that last vote space is filled, other than a few sort of unlikely circumstances. But because of that, if players know that that's obviously my plan and I want that hipster to be probed, they're likely to avoid putting a final vote on that card, which will prevent it from ever being tallied, so I won't actually achieve any success with that card. So you may have to fill some of the cards out with sort of useless votes on your own. I could throw a random free on there, or a meat if I'm not using them, if I'm not working in that direction on any other cards, because again, it won't matter. There are already 2 out of 3 votes placed there for probing. That card is going to count as a probe when it's tallied, if it's tallied. So I then finish my turn, we move on to the next player, they're going to vote, and we go around the table in that order. Again, every time you get to the overseer, before they vote, they place a new card at the back of the conveyor belt. Now, if the overseer places a card at the back of the conveyor belt, and that makes it so that there are 6 cards on the belt, the frontmost card, so the card nearest the fates, automatically gets tallied, even if it is not full. So say, for example, we go through another turn, I've added another card, I realize you can't quite see because it's a bit off camera. I add another card to the end of the belt, we're at 5 now. Okay, we go through another lap of voting. I add a 6th card, and now we've sort of gone over the limit, the max is 5. You automatically tally the front card. Even if that card is not full, even if that card has no votes on it, you tally that card. Now, obviously, if there were votes on it, you would tally it just, whatever it has the most votes for, that's what it becomes. However, if it has no votes or if it has a tie, it doesn't actually get tallied. It still gets removed, but it gets placed at the bottom of the lot deck. You don't just sort of randomly decide where it goes. If it's a tie or there's no votes, it just goes to the bottom of the lot deck, sort of a redo. And then at that point, you'll be back down to 5. So let's pull this guy off here, put it at the bottom of the deck, and slide our other lot cards up. Now, when a lot card becomes full, you will obviously sort of slide it out of the track. So let's say somebody placed a free, maybe I even placed a free, on the last vote of this hipster card here. We slide it out, okay, slide these other cards up to fill its space. We've got 2 votes for probe, 1 vote for free. That's obviously going to count as a probe. You take the tokens that are on that card, you place them back into the common pile, and this now counts as having been probed. So you sort of slip it underneath the probe fate card. And you leave that there for later when you're actually doing the sort of count up at the end of the round, the scoring section. And you continue to go around like this. Other things that can happen, if you ever have fewer than 3 cards in the conveyor belt or on the conveyor belt, say for example, this card scored and this card scored, we'll say this one scored as meat, and we'll say this one scored as freed. At that point, as that card tallies and comes off the conveyor belt, we are under 3. The overseer immediately fills that space by adding a 3rd card to the conveyor belt. So it's sort of a maximum of 5, minimum of 3 scenario that you've got on the conveyor belt. So this goes around the table until all players have voted 6 times. So you're going to have 3 vote chips left because you start with 9, 3 of each. At that point, you stop, and you're going to go through the actual scoring phase. The one thing that you do before you go into the scoring phase is if there are more than 3 cards on the conveyor belt, you're going to resolve, tally, the front cards from the front going towards the back until you have 3. So if you say, by the time we reached the end of the round and everybody had voted 6 times, we had 5 cards on the track, regardless of whether or not they've been filled out, regardless of whether or not they have any votes on them, you're going to tally cards from the front going back until you're down to 3. So we would tally this card, say there were no votes on it, it has a predetermined green, so that's going to count as a probe. Okay, stick that under probe. Then let's say this one also had no votes on it. Okay, that's 2 hipsters predetermined with 1 predetermined free, so that's going to be a free. So let's stick that under the free fate. Now we're down to 3 cards. Okay, we can properly now score the round. So all you're going to do is you're going to look at what you have under your 3 fates. So here, under probe, I have, you can see, 2 hipsters and 1 cow, okay? You can see that under meat, I have 1 hipster who is processed into meat. And under freed, I have 2 hipsters and 2 cows that were freed. So everybody gets to look at those, and then everybody is going to look at their agenda cards in hand and determine which agenda they want to try to accomplish this round. So obviously, let's see, we've got more probed hipsters than we do cows. We've got 1 hipster that got turned into meat, and we've got an equal number of hipsters and cows freed. So looking at, say, these 3 agenda cards in my hand, and looking for one that might best fit this, let's see, right off the bat, I can tell you I've got one that looks like it likes hipsters turned into meat. It likes hipsters being freed, but it also doesn't like hipsters being freed. So a little bit of contradiction there, and you will find that on some of the cards. I've got another one that likes hipsters to be probed, cows to be turned into meat. We didn't do any of that, and no cows to be freed. We obviously failed there. We've got cows set free. I would have 2 on that. 1 cow probed. I would have... Yeah, 1 cow probed, I'd have a point for that, and no cows turned into meat. That's pretty good, we might go with that one. And then finally, I've got hipsters set free, we'd have 2 there, cows turned into meat, we'd have none, and no hipsters probed, we'd get 2 negative points there. So we're gonna go with this one right here, which is the Conservationist. And you can see on the side of his card there, he wants cows to be set free and cows to be probed, but he does not want cows to be turned into meat. So I would take this card, I would put it face down in front of me. All of my other players would do the same, secretly choosing an agenda from those available to them. And they're going to put them face down in front of them, and then simultaneously, once we're all ready, we're going to reveal our agendas and tally up what we've got for points. So I'm playing the Conservationist. First off, I get a victory point for each cow that I freed. Well, I freed 2 cows, so that's 2 victory points. I move up 2 on my victory point tracker. I also get 1 victory point for each cow that I probed. Well, I probed 1 cow, so I'm going to move up another 1 on the victory point tracker. Finally, I lose, or I go up 1 on the mad cow tracker. I think of it as lose because it's negative, but it's actually going up on a negative tracker. I go up 1 on the negative tracker for each cow that I turned into meat. That's none. That's good. You do not want to go up on the mad cow tracker. You have now finished that round. Everybody is going to discard the agenda card that they used. The person who won that round is going to become the new overseer, so they take the stack of lot cards and they're going to handle the addition of lot cards moving forward. Everybody pulls 2 more of each voting token, so 2 more meat, 2 more probe, and 2 more set free, and adds them to their available that they have left after the first round. So you're still only going to have, let's see, 2, 2, 2, and 6, and 3. You're still going to have 9. Is that right? Yeah, you're still going to have 9, but you're going to have fewer of certain votes based off of how you voted that round, because you're probably not going to vote perfectly evenly across the 3 categories, and you're going to have even fewer going into the 3rd category because you only recoup 1 of each type. So let's clear up a little bit here. You're going to discard the cards that were counted in the final scoring for that round. You move those off to the side. Sort of readjust our fate cards here. The actual conveyor belt stays the same, and any votes on the conveyor belt stay there. Your used agenda also gets discarded. And the lot cards get passed off to the new overseer. After everybody gets their new tokens, their new voting tokens, the round just continues. So you start with the overseer, they add a card to the conveyor belt like they always do at the beginning of their turn, and voting proceeds. Overseer goes around the table, new card, overseer goes around the table. Again, as soon as you've voted 6 times, the round ends and we go through the same process. At the end of the game, which is after the 3rd round, you're going to first look at who has the most mad cow points. You actually score this game a little differently than others. You pick the ultimate loser first. So you're going to look at the mad cow tracker, and whoever has the most mad cow points automatically loses the game. So they're out. Then you're going to look at the victory point tracker, and whoever has the most victory points gets, I believe they get processed. believe it says they get processed. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if that means you get accepted into the Alien Confederation or something else, something horrible. But whoever has the most victory points succeeds at getting processed. Whoever has the second most victory points gets probed for science, so good for them. Everybody after that just gets turned into meat. So most people don't win in the endgame scenario. I don't know if there's really any winning there. But then again, you have been abducted by aliens. It's a pretty straightforward game. There are some more advanced rules to it that you can mix in. I believe there's something called passive-aggressive points, where once you choose who loses the game, everybody else just converts their mad cow points into victory points because they no longer matter since somebody else has already sort of bit the bullet. So there's that. There's also the Rebel variant that you can mix in with the player cards that I've not read into. There's a couple other modifiers. You can use these once per game sort of bonus tokens, this little times two modifier. Once per game, not per round, but per game, when you vote, and you would basically have this with all your other vote chips, you can take this and you can stick it with your vote. So if, for example, I was voting on this card right here, which shows 2 hipsters, 4 votes, one of which is predetermined as a probe, and I really wanted to make sure that I got them probed, and I placed 1 probe token there, I could, once per game, take this times 2 multiplier and place that with the probe token, and that basically means that that counts as 2 probes, and it actually also fills up the space that the second probe would fill up. So now there are actually 3 probes, guaranteeing that if that card tallies, it's going to count as a probe. So basically, when you're dealing out your starting tokens, everybody just gets 1 of those. You don't use those in the sort of like learner game, but you can factor them in as you can with the passive-aggressive victory points and a few other modifiers that are listed in the rulebook. But other than that, that's the game. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, easy to learn, kind of tricky to master. I find that it's difficult to keep all of my agendas in mind while I'm voting. I have to constantly reference, are there any sort of cross agendas that line up really well? Like maybe 3 out of my 4 agendas, they want cows to be probed. Okay, cool. So I should focus on that in general because I have multiple cards that I can use to get points off of that. However, if you end up with 4 agendas that are completely different and have no sort of cross compatibility, your voting is just going to be random wherever you think you can get the most functionality, and then you're just going to go with whatever agenda works best for you at the end. Or you pick one blindly right at the beginning and just go with it. However you choose to play the game. Like I said, fun game, silly game, enjoyable. I would certainly recommend picking it up. I've always enjoyed the Fight in a Box games. I love supporting those guys, and I will continue to do so. Anyways, that is it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, go down below and subscribe, and while you're there, set your notification bell to all. Otherwise, subscribing basically does absolutely nothing except artificially inflate my numbers, which I appreciate, but it's kind of useless. And if you want to, leave a like or dislike, whatever you feel, and if you have time, leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.